Well, thank you indeed, Angela, for that very nice introduction to a program we call Who Holds the Power in Indie Publishing? Questions of power and the struggle to find balance in that assertion of power are appropriate ones to ponder here in Austin, Texas. A mile and a half away stands the Lyndon Baines Johnson Presidential Library, adjacent to the University of Texas campus. President Johnson liked power. He liked the feel of it, the wielding of it. But that hunger was harnessed and redeemed by a deeper understanding of the human condition, by a sympathy for the underdog, for the downtrodden, for the outcast. And it was a sympathy rooted in his own experience. That's what Barack Obama observed exactly a year ago today when he and the three living ex-presidents assembled at the LBJ Library for a Civil Rights Summit, marking the 50th anniversary of passage of the 1965 Civil Rights Act. Indeed, LBJ liked power, and he had a great deal to say about his own personal power and the power of the United States. Not everything LBJ said is repeatable among polite company. But there is one quote of his on the limits of power that you, as publishers and authors and business people, may identify with. Being president, he said, is like being a jackass in a hailstorm. There's nothing to do but stand there and take it. Now, once upon a time, authors and publishers, along with readers and booksellers, knew their separate places in the book world, and they stuck to them. The distribution of power was uneven, maybe even unfair, but the pecking order seemed to make sense. Then the revolution erupted, and the digital transformation of books and publishing created a more level playing field. I'm going to give up. I'm sorry, because that's not acceptable. For you or for me? That's much better. All right, well, I guess I will have to hold this, but I'm sorry to interrupt that. I hope you like that story from LBJ. If you haven't gone to the library and you have time, it is worth the visit. So I promise you, you will be rewarded by that. Let me just start again by saying that once upon a time, authors and publishers, along with readers and booksellers, knew their separate places in the book world, and they stuck to them. The distribution of power was uneven, maybe even unfair, but the pecking order seemed to make sense. Then the revolution erupted, and the digital transformation of books and publishing created a more level playing field. Authors and independent publishers especially rejoiced at this newfound freedom to write, publish, and sell books. As with so many revolutions, though, the change has come at a cost. In 2015, who holds the power in the book world? Are the rulers wise and beneficent, or crass and cold-hearted? Are we building a utopia for readers or making their lives miserable? Well, those are the questions that I want to put to the panel. As Angela Bowles said, all of them members of your board of directors. I will introduce them. I will also give you their Twitter handles. I understand that IBPA is looking for some tweets on this with that hashtag PubU2015. So if you would try to remember to tweet with their handles. My own is @BeyondTheBook. After a podcast series that I host. And I'll start in the very far end, introduce our panel here. Reina Diorio. Reina, welcome.
Thank you.
Reina is online, or at Twitter, I should say, at Reina Diorio. She's the founder of San Francisco-based Little Pickle Press. She has written her way through life as a student, a lawyer, an investment banker, a private equity investor, and now as an author and publisher of children's media. Little Pickle Press is a 21st century publisher dedicated to helping parents and educators cultivate conscious, responsible little people by stimulating explorations of the meaningful topics of their generation through a variety of media technologies and techniques. And then to Reina's left is Kelly Gallagher. Kelly, welcome.
Thank you.
Kelly is Vice President of Content Acquisition for Ingram Content Group. You can tweet for him @Ingram Content. Ingram Content Group is a comprehensive publishing industry services company that offers numerous solutions, including physical book distribution, print on demand, and digital services. At Ingram, Kelly manages the content acquisition publisher team for North America and leads Ingram's selling and business development activities for print on demand and digital distribution products. Prior to joining Ingram, he worked for 6 years at Bowker, serving as Vice President of Publishing Services. And then finally, right to my right here is Jim Milliot. Jim, welcome.
Thank you.
Jim is Editorial Director of Publishers Weekly. Their Twitter handle is Publishers WKLY. He is also Vice President of PWXYZ, the company that acquired PW from Reed in April 2010. Jim's been with PW for 20 years, starting as the Business and News Editor, topics he still covers today. And prior to joining Publishers Weekly, Jim Milliot was Executive Editor at Simba Information, a publisher of newsletters and market studies on a variety of media segments, including trade and educational book publishing. So we know where everybody is now. Let's get down to the questions about who holds the power. And, you know, Reina DiOrio, you've been in this business for not a very long time. In fact, your timing was exquisite on this. You got into it right at the beginning of the Great Recession. So if you
That's right.
You only started at bottom. There's no place to go but
up. Correct.
But your own background is, of course, well, I'll put it this way. You were in finances, you were in the money. You were in the money business for many, many years. And I wonder whether the people who hold the power in publishing, whoever they are, whichever the players are really the people with the money. How do you feel about that?
Well, I'd argue that access to capital is an important part of being successful in publishing, Chris, but I think that the playing field has definitely changed, and I attest that change makers have a lot of power. And I consider change makers as those of us, I consider myself among them, who come into publishing to mix it up. Publishing hadn't changed a lot since the Gutenberg press, and the digital tsunami started coming in the mid-2000s, and it created a lot of opportunity for new entrants to have a voice.
Well, I think we'll talk about technology, certainly, but I do want to keep on that notion of the importance of capital. It was the point that you made for me, and a light bulb went on. It's an approach to thinking about business, because after all, publishing is a business like all the rest of them. And so many businesses really can't grow entirely on revenue. They need capital, they need outside sources of funding to get their foothold. And you know that very well indeed from having advised startup companies in the course of your business experience prior to becoming a publisher. Tell this audience about the importance of that. And the capital you've got is your own.
Right, so I started my company with my own capital and scaled it for 4 years with that. And then I went and I sought outside investors. And I had the acumen to do that. But I think it definitely takes capital to scale. I mean, you can start with a hardcore team and give them equity, but ultimately, if you're really going to scale your business, you need capital. Revenue is certainly a great start, but to build a meaningful platform that's scalable, you need capital.
And considering the competition today, I mean, we heard from Peter Hildig Smith just about how difficult it is in this world where there's only so few book buyers relative to everything else,
right,
and so many book titles. You need as many resources as you can possibly have at your command.
Yeah, and capital buys those resources.
Absolutely. Well, in the question of who holds the power, Jim Milliot, I'm looking at you. You're in the media. The media holds the power. It's not the money, it's the media, isn't it?
Well, we like to think so, but it's not as true as it once was. But going to what Peter, the presentation had before, goes to a lot of the stuff that we see at PW, and discoverability, of course, is the byword or the buzzword for the last 2 or 3 years that you never really heard before. And I think what we're talking a little bit about here with Chris is that to cut through the clutter, reviews and publicity and some way to get your book to stand out is important. At PW, we do like 9,000 book reviews a year, which makes us the biggest review medium in the country and most likely the world. So that's one way to do it. And our position has become some ways more important because a lot of the mainstream media, as most of you probably know, do far fewer reviews than they ever did before. Now, some of that has been picked up by bloggers and that type of other social media avenues, but we still like to think people do look to see some sort of credibility, some sort of authority behind it, other than, you know, some anonymous blogger who may or may not know what they're talking about.
And I guess I was poking at you a bit, Jim, because we know that the story is of the media. It doesn't hold the power, but they like to think they do, and they also like to tell a good story, actually. That's what the business of the media is. And the story over the last year had been this incredible rise of independent publishing, self-publishing, however you want to label it. But your perspective, having been in the business for 20 years, is that there's always been a strong community of independent publishing. This new world order that we see may not be so new after all.
Right. The New World Order is a lot bigger than it was, but one thing that is definitely true, it's always been easier to publish than to find readers, even before the digital revolution. I remember going to Ingram with a new boss of mine, and we were talking about this very thing. I mean, Ingram's warehouse is really big. And so you just see there and you stare at everything and you think, wow, you know, how is anybody going to find the book they want? And again, even before the digital revolution, printing technology had been coming down. Ingram pioneered print on demand and all that. It's not, there are not many easier things to do than publish a book. I think we have to face facts. So, you know, the digital revolution, what the big change has been, at least now, if you do an ebook, you can actually get it in a distribution channel if all you do is post it on Amazon. And at least there somebody has a chance to get the book. But as Peter, I think, frighteningly pointed out, if there's 52 million titles up there, good luck.
Indeed. Well, Kelly Gallagher, I want to bring you in here because we asked you about this question of who holds the power for a series of microcasts that we pushed out on Twitter. And in your answer, I have to tell you, Kelly, you wanted it both ways. You said, well, everybody holds the power, but there really isn't any power in any one place. To talk about this kind of paradox of power that we are living in today when it comes to publishing.
Kind of like my marriage. You know, I love my wife, actually.
This is not being recorded, Kelly.
Thank you. You know, I think the question begs a bigger question, and that is, it's not so much about power anymore. There is a bifurcation, there's a word for you, of the industry that's happened where anybody can do just about anything. And so if you are a homemade publisher, you can go and source content and you can go retail that content. And so, you know, as the topic was set up, you know, it used to be very clear lines, and now it's very diversified, and the lines have been blurred. And so I think really anybody can hold the power for publishing. As Jim said, anybody can publish a book, but what's required of an indie publisher, and I'll try to limit my comments just to this group here, what's required of an indie publisher is so much more to be successful. In that you have to have this affinity with your author, and you have to take charge of, in some sense, the retail aspects of how books are sold. And you can't just simply rely on whether it's a big Amazon or a small local shop. You've got to be intimately involved in every part of the process. Those that do that, I think, hold a lot of power. And so I see that as an everything or nothing kind of thing, where you have the power, or if you're not exercising in all of those areas, you probably hold little power.
Right. Well, and we were looking for players, you know, sort of who are the individuals or the roles that may be where power lies. But it struck me, listening to Peter Hildick-Smith right now, that the power is in the data. Without access to the data, without gathering the data, without understanding what kind of data we need in the first place, everything else you do is really kind of, you know, shot in the dark.
You know, what I would say to indie publishing, and I apologize for my coughing and allergies here, is the single biggest thing you can do beyond getting amazingly great content is to invest a significant part of your time on the metadata and the discovery more than anything else. Because you have the power to now affect that. You now have the power to drive SEO, search engine optimization. You have the ability to place your book into places that, because of technology, you've never had before. But if you've got crummy metadata, and I'm talking far more than just a good Onyx feed of basic metadata, but social metadata, various elements of the data, if you're not spending time refining that and building your own discoverability, you're probably going to lack the power to be able to sell.
Indeed. You know, Kelly, you were apologizing for your allergies. We met yesterday, and you said you had some seasonal allergies, and I understand what that's like. I'm from Boston, and we've been through the last 6 months of winter, so I'm allergic to all this nice weather, at least until this morning. So I know how you feel. But you know, Jim Milley, when it comes to power, the other thing about Peter Hildick's presentation that struck me and is important is the data that Kelly was speaking about, and SEO and all the rest of it, search engine optimization, is the power of those bookstores still. The role that the stores play in getting books into readers' hands and then selling them is tremendous. And so we should all really hope that the power of Barnes & Noble, at least, and of course the independent players, persists for some time to come.
Right. Everybody is, I mean, well, I was going to say, you know, if you're in New York in particular, when you look at, you know, where's the power lie? I mean, the shift between, in terms of kind of the big picture, publisher and retailer has totally shifted to the retailer. And it's partly because of Amazon's domination in certain areas. And it's also because of the consolidation. I mean, when I was younger, I mean, you had a lot more outlets, you had a lot more independents, and there were more there's still a lot of places to sell books now, but it's a little bit more diffuse. Today, the publishers could live in a world, if you talk to them, where Amazon and other online retailers exist, where there's a strong group of independent bookstores, and in today's, you know, where we're sitting today, Barnes & Noble still exists. Because, you know, everybody I live and work in New York, so I'll point to New York a lot. Everybody in New York thinks along the lines what Peter is talking about, in that, you know, Barnes & Noble and the stores still drive a lot of discoverability. And to have a really substantial, sustainable book environment, you really need a strong retail and you need a strong online.
Can I offer a dissenting opinion on that?
No.
With all due respect to Peter, and you know, especially for indie publishing, I would contend likely that ship has sailed. The likelihood of getting into Barnes & Noble or spending the amount of effort required to get into retail today for an indie publisher, I think that's a lot of effort for marginal return, that I would still push back and say that publishers now have tools today that they can more directly go to where the readers are. And I would say, as you think about discoverability, you think more about topical discovery versus book discovery. If you're writing a book on cancer, don't think about this is a book on cancer. Think about people who have cancer and where are people going that have cancer today. And find those consumers in the stream. Place your rock in the stream of whatever topics you're writing about, and go and find them. And there are retail services today. There's still a lot of road to hoe on some of these things like retail services, but I would say just be careful. I'm not giving up if there's retailers in the room. I love you, we need you, but you know, for indie publishing, I just wanted to offer a little controversial counterpoint to that.
I don't find that controversial at all, because I was thinking the same thing. Because if the story is get your book into Barnes & Noble, for this audience and for so many people publishing today, if you're not the big five, that's going to be a real challenge and may not be worth the effort when you have so much other types of opportunity. And Reina DiOrio, I think you recognize that, and so the power for you as a publisher is in the partnerships that you have formed,
Right.
and the approaches that you've taken to finding those readers. Tell us about an example.
Yeah, so I agree with you completely, Kelly. I think that connecting to your community directly is extremely powerful. And you know, the analog to that is consumers really care about the why. And so, for example, at Little Pickle Press, we're a mission-driven company. We're a certified B Corp. We are the kind of...
What a certified B Corp.
Certified B Corp is a company that's held to higher standards of environmental friendliness, being humanitarian, being good to our employees. It's adjudicated by a body of B Lab professionals. Like Patagonia has probably got the most brand name recognition as a B Corp. So we've been a B Corp since inception. Just recently, we partnered with another B Corp, Cabot Creamery Cooperative, which is a 100-year-old co-op out of New England, another B Corp, to raise awareness about where food comes from, because we really care that our children really have no concept where their food comes from. We have a book in our collection, The Cow in Patrick O'Shanahan's Kitchen, that is a farm-to-table book and elucidates that point. Cabot partnered with us to get the word out to their community, to our community, to benefit the One Campaign. One Campaign is Bono's humanitarian organization dedicated to ending extreme hunger in the world and raising awareness about food origins. So the triumvirate came together, One Campaign with their 9 million members, Cabot Creamery Cooperative with their 9 million reach through their cheese board bloggers, and Little Pickle Press. And we've successfully sold 5,500 copies of the book, and we're about to reprint it. So we found our consumer directly through communities that had their values aligned along an issue.
Right, and I think actually that resonates with, again, it's fascinating, a great presentation before this, our own discussion from Peter Hildig-Smith. Talked about this blink moment, this moment when someone makes a decision about purchasing a book, and you alluded to the answering the why question.
Right.
It's not so much about the content. We'll talk about content in a minute because that remains important. But why do I want to buy this book? We have to have an answer for that. And the why can come in various ways. It can be about because I'm a member of the community, because I want to know more, because I want my kids to wind up with a better planet when they grow up, that kind of thing.
Yeah, in this case, all three organizations really cared that most children think that milk comes from a carton in the refrigerator. And we had a problem with that. So, that was the glue. That was the why. I mean, we really want to educate children and to get them curious about where food comes from.
Indeed, and Kelly Gallagher, the kinds of services that Ingram Content offers, we should tell people a little bit about them, is Create Spark. There's also a fascinating new one called Ingram Construct, which allows people to create essentially mashups of their own previously published works. A fascinating kind of twist, because if you've got any kind of a backlist, to be able to remarket it when there's a particularly hot marketing opportunity is a great choice to have. But really, all these technologies and all these digital distribution services allow you to reach an audience that is not just the book buyer in the U.S. So the power may lie not just in our national audience, but in a world audience.
Yeah, so I would say, especially for independent publishers, what you need to be good at and what you don't need to be good at really should be clarified early on in your process. Or as you have time to go through a new strategy session, the things that you need to be good at, content, you've got to be developing excellent content. You've got to be good at messaging the content, but most everything else, at the end of the day, I don't know that anybody's ever going to write on a independent publisher's tombstone, awesome at supply chain, but we spend so much time trying to manage supply chain, and so, whether it's Ingram or someone else that offers excellent supply chain services, you should really not be doing a whole lot about distribution. You should be, until you've scaled large enough to care about that, what I would say is you have enough to worry about focusing on content development and putting a voice to that content, that the back end, the back room really should be, you should be finding experts to be able to do that. At Ingram specifically, it works for us because we've built a whole wholesale business with 38,000, points of connectivity globally, whether it's with digital or with print. And so that's what we do. And our model is, not to make money until something actually sells.
Right, and I have to say, Kelly, you took it really well when I had you having purchased Amazon just now. I described create space to Ingram. I was thinking of Ingram Spark.
Right.
So just to clarify that.
But it's about simplifying the process as much as you can. We're not perfect at it. We're a business in transition too, which I would really want to make sure that it's a fast-changing world that we're still trying to figure out along the way. 8 years ago, 90% of our business was traditional wholesale, buying books from publishers, putting books in boxes and sending them to retailers. Last year, less than 50% of our revenue came from traditional wholesale. Talk about having to change a business quick or go out of business, So we're still trying to figure it out, but we think a distribution model that we can help publishers with makes a lot of sense.
Well, okay, let's drill into that global audience just a little bit, Kelly, so the audience here can understand better whether their book fits into that. Talk about the kinds of books that do well, and particularly where they do well.
It's really interesting. The global, obviously we know that in the U.S. market, it's flat is the new up. I think Angela Bull coined that phrase at BISG when she was doing book stats, and we're not seeing a lot of growth. I've got some interesting statistics I'll share in a minute, just because you would hope for me to share some statistic. But where people are finding the growth opportunities is globally. What's interesting is academic titles, nonfiction titles, business books, and education books really have a global market. The demand for English language content globally, English is the first language of business and education globally. And so if you're focusing on those areas, you have a reasonable shot at being able to sell globally.
You have some numbers to share as well.
Well, it's just within, some hope for the indie market. We did an analysis on Nielsen data recently, and what we discovered was what we're calling now the thickening of the long tail, which is all about the growth of indie publishing, in my mind. We looked at titles that sold 10,000 or more units annually, titles that sold 100 to 1,000 units annually, and titles that sold less than 100 units through the BookScan data. Titles selling 10,000 units or more is in decline over the last 4-year period by about 3 to 5%, meaning fewer big titles are selling. Same thing for even 100 to 1,000 units. That was in about a 6 to 7% decline, but titles selling 100 units or less, 35% increase over this 4-year period. And when you look at who those are, it's all of you. And so the market is open and ready to embrace more titles, I think. It's just how you connect to those market opportunities.
Well, Jamelia, that makes me think of a question. You say you live and report in New York City, so you're close by the Big Five, formerly the Big Six. They have seen this attack on their power, at least I think that's how they have viewed it. How are they responding, and how do they view this group here, the independent publisher?
Well, I think what they're really seeing is, I think they acknowledge, for one thing, that things have changed dramatically, and every house in New York and a lot of the larger independents have all changed dramatically. But I do think they are out there looking for different business models. They're looking for different types of titles. They're looking for new authors. I think they very much have looked at self-publishing nowadays as really a possible farm team. The London Book Fair starts next week, And within the past 2 weeks, we've reported on 3 or 4 deals that self-published authors have signed with the major houses. And we're talking, I think 7-figure deals for every one of those. So they certainly are not ignoring the new world reality, and they're not building a wall around them. In fact, they are out there actively recruiting, looking at BookScan, looking at the numbers, looking at that, what's selling, and certainly willing to use their capital to take what they would say the author to the next level.
But I think, Reina Durio, you would say that it's kind of, if not too late, they certainly have come to this game late. And the situation you found 6 years ago when you started Little Pickle Press was of an industry that had kind of, if not fallen asleep, had sort of taken it easy for a while, particularly when it comes to technology. And you were coming out of a world of startups, of sort of seizing the opportunity that the digital revolution provided, and really moving very quickly and not worrying about business models. Do you think in the 6 years you've been at it that indeed, as Jim says, they've begun to come out of that restful state and to act, or is there still an opportunity that independent publishers have to steal a march on the traditional publishers?
Yeah, I think there's caution among the big 5 to go into technology. They're definitely doing it, but it creates an opportunity for the indies to be early adopters or on the vanguard of change. I'll give you one technology example for me, kind of drives it home for indies and the potential. In 2010, I was in Bologna at the Tools of Change conference before it closed down. I was on a panel with Dominique Rocca, moments after that, and after that, the president of Disney spoke, and I was in the audience, and I was rapt, and I was watching his PowerPoint about his book app, for It's a Small World, and it was their most celebrated, most decorated, best-selling book app that had yielded them, a lot of income. That evening, I had my phone by my nightstand because in California we had the IBPA Awards, and which was about honoring the best digital apps of that year. And our little app, What Does It Mean to Be Global, was up against this exact app, the It's a Small World app, in the multicultural category, and we won. And we spent $5,000 developing our app, and allow me to assure you that Disney spent at least 1 0, possibly 2 zeros more with the marketing. And to me, that is a perfect example of how, independent content creators really can compete against, very well capitalized, established old guard.
Right. It's a good story because there was a point I wanted to ask you to make, which is in the past, technology was a tremendous investment, and you really needed to be a Disney to, have the kind of technological power to make things happen. Today, the technology is, if not free, very, very inexpensive.
Right.
It can get you to that award ceremony.
Correct.
Yeah. And so the capital that you're spending isn't so much on technology. Where do you decide to make your spending decisions? Is it marketing? If you've got that money and you want to put it to work for you in the most powerful ways, what do you do?
We invest in content and people.
So you're telling me publishing's about content?
I know, there's something different.
But what do you mean content people? You don't mean just
No,
authors.
content and people. Whenever I have capital, I'll spend it to develop new content, and we do it. We take risks and we go after big projects for us. And then I think human resources are just, they're invaluable. They're priceless. You get a like-minded person who really wants to change the industry with you. That's invaluable, and we'll spend money on people.
Right, and also you are emulating people. There's a power in the heroes of this industry that they inspire you, and we'll talk to Jim about some people who are sort of future inspiration, but you've had experiences working with people, or just being at conferences and I believe at this one and hearing someone speak and really being inspired to want to follow in their footsteps?
It's true. I think, my background is technology. I was a technology corporate securities lawyer, then I was a technology investment banker. So I like the people who break the rules. I like the people who say, you don't have to do it that way. It can be done this way. So, I admire those people in publishing that are doing that. I mentioned Dominique. I consider Dominique Rocca one of those people at Sourcebooks. I consider Kevin Donahue at Epic one of those people. If you haven't met Tim Ditlow, he's here for the conference. You should meet him. He's the VP Content at Epic. They're doing great things there. LeVar Burton at Reading Rainbow. I mean, how cool to pull out an old brand out of PBS and make it this iconic splash in the digital world. Jeff Rosen over at Humble Bundle. Does anybody know what Humble Bundle is? Okay, 3 people in the room. Humble Bundle is this incredible platform that's like the new flash retail for value-minded people. They're making hundreds of thousands of dollars for publishers. It's an incredible, new platform. You should check it out. Humble Bundle. Jeremy Thomas over at Inkshares. Brooke Warner over at She Writes. They're solving problems in a different way, and it's exciting. It's at a very exciting time to be in publishing.
Right, and Jamelia, one of the people that I have not had kind of a hero crush on, but certainly have admired, is Paul Reynolds at Fablevision in Boston. His brother Peter Reynolds is a very successful children's author, and they have been part of seeing books not simply as books, as that particular product, but and looking at things as content and finding out what's the best way to tell that story. So sometimes it's a print book, sometimes it's an app. There are moments when they will work with the PBS to develop a TV show. Is the book business, can we still call it that? And if there are people who are visionaries, are there anybody you particularly look to see more from?
Well, it's interesting because we were talking about that last night at the cocktail party with somebody, that it's without question that the definition of a book is changing. What is a book? And for one thing, it doesn't seem like it's going to be an enhanced ebook. I think I was talking about that with Peter. At one point, 2 or 3 years ago, a number of people thought that, well, the future of publishing will be combining print with all sorts of interactive digital elements. And while that's true to some degree, at least in the adult world, that really, hasn't worked that well. What I think you're really seeing, and a lot of this goes to, targets and communities and niche. Last year I was on a panel here, presenting our we do a fast-growing Publishers of the Year every year, and niche publishers had always been among the ones that were succeeding the best because they had a target audience, they knew who they wanted to publish, and it might involve several different types of formats. It could be print, it could be print plus, with kits or something like that. Could be sidelines, and it could be like old-fashioned, media, even calendars and that sort of thing, where you really zero in on some type of community, and then you really just kind of blanket it.
Indeed. Kelly Gallagher, there have been a number of shifts in format that you've seen in your own business, and you've alluded to some of the flat growth, the sort of flat is the new up when it comes to digital. Consumers are driving choices here, and they seem to have made a choice, and I've got some nods in the room when Jim said it, that they're not looking for enhanced books. What do you know about the direction consumers are taking this business? They hold a lot of power as well.
Let me preface this with a cough. I apologize. I've never had to walk off stage before. That's the first.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Maybe it goes back to the original question of who holds the power, and Peter, you're getting a lot of quotes here because I think, ultimately what Peter demonstrated was the consumer holds the power. The consumer holds the power in format. Publishers felt when the digital shift was going to happen that they could drive consumers to a more efficient, cost-effective model, which was ebooks. And I don't know that it's backfired, but what it has happened in the last couple years with 0% reported growth last year in ebook consumption means that the consumer has essentially said, don't tell me how to consume. I will consume how I wish to consume. One thing we forget about a lot of times in publishing is, and again, Peter was good to point this out, was it's a limited subset, and even within that subset, the people who make up book buying have preferences and habits. And so to embrace just a digital strategy or to embrace just a print strategy is likely a fatal error today. Back to that word bifurcation. You have to have all three. And so how do you afford that is a big question. You've got to find ways to be able to, it's one of the things I think manufacture on demand offers for not necessarily investing thousands of dollars on big long print runs anymore. We've got large publishers today that essentially will do an offset print run for pre-orders only, and then they will move it into manufacture on demand. Sometimes with us, sometimes with other manufacture on demand printers. But what that affords them is access to capital to be able to do a digital version, a hardcover version, a soft cover version, and kind of make that global accessibility. So it's a 30-30-30-10 world of format, and it's your job to figure it out and to make sure you can do it.
Well, it's tough. Things move so fast. And Jim, you mentioned that consumers have, for the moment at least, rejected the so-called enhanced book, the e-book with various non-text elements. I guess we could summarize it that way. And that's a surprise to people who saw the tablet arrive and really thought it was going to drive just that very format. And your own reading and your own reporting at PW of the situation is that, ironically, the tablet has probably played a role in slowing ebook growth. Can you tell us about that?
Well, there had always been a lot of speculation that as more digital reading moved to tablets where you can do lots of other things, that people would in fact be doing those other things. And on the last numbers I saw, the dedicated digital readers, Kindle or a Nook, have gone down, and the tablets have become, the device of choice. And, and I think that's definitely what we've seen, that people are maybe not reading so much on their tablets as they used to, and we all know what you have access to on a tablet, and you may have every intention to start reading a book, but all of a sudden some game pops up and off you go. So and it reflects something that we haven't quite talked about much. I mean, what book, we'll call it books for now, what the book world is up against. I mean, this is something else that people have talked about a lot in the last few years, is the competition for time. I mean, there's television, huge time suck, but with video games and all the online things you can do now, books are competing, in an ever more competitive environment for the entertainment dollar.
Well, indeed, and before we go to questions from the audience, I want to go back to René Diorio, because you started by talking about the power of this industry, and when you made that decision to get into book publishing at that particularly opportune moment, right as the Great Recession began, one of the first things you did was, well, tell us.
Well, I joined the IBPA. It was the first thing that I did, and that was in 2009. And I'd like to make the point, Chris, that there's strength in numbers, and that this is a very, very powerful community. So you should leverage this entire experience, because it will inure to your benefit in order of magnitude. But IBPA, can I just tell a quick story about? So one of the first member benefits that I took advantage of with the IBPA was the Baker and Taylor program. There's loads and loads of member benefits. Like NetGalley, you could never get a NetGalley account with 1 or 2 titles. You need the IBPA to help you. Publishers Weekly, you can't advertise in Publishers Weekly today on your own, most probably. Well, if you can, my hat's off to you. But IBPA is an amazing program for that. So there's strength in numbers. I had my Baker and Taylor account, and we started selling a lot of books to Baker and Taylor. It was awesome. but then we weren't getting paid.
I was gonna say, did they pay you?
So there was that. And so then it wasn't until we were big enough to have our own distribution with IPS, Ingram Publisher Services, took us on about a year and a half ago. And there's strength in numbers there, too. And guess what? Baker & Taylor listens to IPS, and all of a sudden the checks started flying in. And I was really grateful to be part of a bigger community that had strength to look out for our interests. So.
Indeed. Well, Kelly, maybe a last word on that power of community. There are multiple communities. There is no single independent book publishing community. This is one such community here. You speak to and see people from a variety of those communities. Do you see that? Does that ring true for you, that the community has a great deal of power in this as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We are a lot of little islands here, but we have one continent called IBPA. And what I've seen happen to, basically co-opt the opportunity, Rita talked about IPS. We can stand in a much different place in the line. And again, whether it's, there's a lot of good distributors out there. IPS is just one of them, Cardinal, Perseus, others. But, belonging to a community makes a big difference. The other thing it does is you start collaborating and you start, sharing ideas. And, if you're going to get anything out of this, apart from us just trying to impart knowledge in these workshops, it's you ought to meet and make it a goal to get 20 business cards from fellow participants here. If you don't get 20 cards, you failed in your mission here at coming here, because it's not just about listening to really great workshops, it's about making these points of connectivity, because they're going to learn and do something different than you are. And that's really, I think, where I see the strength in numbers in really coming through.
Well, I hope everyone gets a card from each of these three panelists before they leave. I want to thank Raina DiOrio, Kelly Gallagher, and Jim Elliott for their contribution. In the time we have left, about 5 minutes, I'd like to get out into the room here and get some questions directed to the panel from the floor. And raise a hand, and I will get to as many as I can. Tell us who the question's for, and maybe tell us your name as well.
Yes, I'm Leanne Mancini. My question is for Kelly. Ingram Sparks Division, for the Christian section. Do you allow independent publishers to sell their books on their websites in addition to you being the distributor?
Yeah, absolutely. So with Ingram Spark, which is really a platform to both publish your book, print your book, or digital, we will put it out into the wholesale channels, both digital and print. And then also, it offers you services to actually sell your book, through your own websites. We're enhancing that. Within the next couple months, you'll hear a lot about retail services. Retail services give you the opportunity to, in a much more expedited way, sell. We're partnering with a company called Airbook, AERBOOK, where you can actually start doing that in a more simplified way. But yes, you can absolutely sell your own books as well.
Okay, thank you, Kelly.
My name's Aaron Barnhart, and I have also a question for Kelly, just to clarify something you said very early in your remarks. My understanding from what you said is that if you choose a good distribution partner, if you don't overthink the availability part, the part of the talk that we didn't get to today with Peter, don't overthink that. Find a distribution partner who will make sure there's availability for your titles to the audience you're reaching, and concentrate on discovery and conversion.
Absolutely. So again, a lot of people think their job is done when they get their books into Baker & Taylor and Ingram, and we are not a marketing company. You have to have a good distribution network, but your focus needs to be on putting your rock into the stream of where customers are. And so make the content, and then make the content discoverable is what we would say. Retail services, marketing it, but then also offering that opportunity for sales. We'll distribute it, and we'll sell it, ultimately get it to the consumer, but that's really the job that you can do best.
And Raina Diori, I would imagine you have found that to be true, and you've really had to spread your bets around.
Absolutely.
I'll just, while you're running to the next question, HarperCollins is now selling books direct. I never really thought I would have seen that anytime soon, but HarperCollins is now selling books direct because they understand that they're going to gain a better margin and they're going to gain a different access to customers than Amazon or anybody else can deliver for them. And so the day and age of going direct, I think, is here when even the big guys are starting to flirt with it.
All right, well, I want to ask Peter Hildebrand-Smith a question. Can I do that? Bring you back, Peter, for a question. So you've been hearing us talk about all these different power players in the publishing business. You dive into the data. Does the data tell you if you push in one direction or another of all these various areas, you're going to really get a result? I mean, you were talking about covers and just the small tweaks it can make. If you put your efforts into the consumer side more, that's probably going to have an effect. But what about the other places we've heard about?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, the comment was right on target. Invest in discovery and conversion, and let Ingram and other partners do the availability piece. Are there any magic bullets on this thing? Not really. But I think having new channels besides Amazon with their 52 million titles is a really good thing, because you have a better chance of being seen. And the more you can support those other channels, I think the healthier the business is overall. And Amazon's certainly not going to sleep on this. They're dealing with a whole lot of other new growth strategies that we didn't get to talk about, but they're going to continue to grow market share. So I would encourage everybody to find other partners that can get you that less cluttered access to your customer and build those relationships.
Well, I want to thank again the panel, Raina Diori, Kelly Gallagher, and Jim Milliot. I'm reminded of something LBJ said at a campaign stop in 1964. He said he was for a great many things and against damn few. So when it comes to selling your books, I think that's how you should approach it. My name's Chris Kinnear. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.